Welcome to Founder Tactics, a podcast where we unpack the strategy and serendipity behind building great companies. I'm your host, Julia Lucidi. Today's episode was recorded live at the Fort Lauderdale Tech Meetup. Our guest is Maxeme Tuchman, the co-founder and CEO of Caribu, before selling the company to Mattel. Caribu is an interactive video calling app that lets kids read and play with family and friends from anywhere in the world. During the pandemic, their growth 10x'd overnight, helping thousands of families stay connected. It was recognized as one of Time's best inventions and one of Apple's best apps of 2020. Max also made history as the first Latina founder to raise $1 million through equity crowdfunding. She was featured by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 female founders. In this conversation, Maxeme shares what it really took to build Caribu. She talks about her discipline, the tough decisions, the unexpected opportunities, and the moment Mattel approached her with an acquisition offer. She also reflects on what that experience taught her and how it changed her life. It's honest, raw, inspiring, and full of practical lessons for any founder. Now let's dive in. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here. Should we dive straight into it?
Let's do it.
I'd love to learn a little bit more about your background and what brought you to become a startup founder. I know that you had a story before that wasn't quite entrepreneurship, and you were able to develop some skills that supported you and other skills that you had to develop when you did start your startup. Could you share a little bit more about, first of all, what drove you to take the step into entrepreneurship? And second, what are some of the skills that prepared you for that?
Okay. Well, first, Julia, thank you so much for having me here. And I appreciate how many of you came out tonight, because I do think the kind of like art and magic of acquisitions is such a black box. And especially hearing from a woman or a Latina founder who has sold her company, I'm hoping that there are some things that you are going to take with you tonight that either will help you in your founder journey or another founder that you meet, or someone that you work with.
That's great. Yes.
So I always start my story by talking about what it is that drives me and why my entire career has been focused on education. And that is because I'm the granddaughter of Holocaust survivors. Thank you. Yeah, it's not. Yeah, it's, and especially today, in this day and age, it's really tough to be that. But one of the things that I think it taught me, when you have grandparents that have gone through that type of, terrible experience, and then they had to flee to Cuba, and then they had to flee to Miami, right? So you have this generational fleeing in this diaspora, constantly learning a new language, constantly having to make new friends, starting a new business. They would always say to me, and I feel like a lot of you in the room have probably heard this, it's a big thing in immigrant communities, which was, the only thing you can take with you when you flee in the middle of the night is what's up here, which is terrifying, right? Like, you think about that and you're like, you're absolutely right. You can sew some silverware in your pockets, in the lining of your jacket, and then this is it. So it used to be like education, but my family didn't have formal education. So it was the things that they had learned, the apprenticeships that they had done, the things that they had understood by being around other people. And because of that, I started to realize, wow, as a kid growing up in Miami, as a first generation Cuban, Jewish and Cuban, and English being my second language, I realized education was not only the only thing you could take with you, but it was the only thing that would allow me to make it in our new home. And so I became obsessed with the idea that education was the great equalizer, that if everyone just got a high quality education to begin with, starting at birth, that we could solve a lot of today's problems. So I start there to tell you why every single thing I've done is about kids and education and high quality education and access to education. And so, as Julia said, I wasn't in entrepreneurial roles. I was in policy. I was in government. I was in nonprofits. But what I realized is I was a high school teacher at Miami Northwestern. Any Bulls? No? Okay. So when I was teaching my students, I had 240 students and I felt really great about the impact I was making on my students, but it's 240 a year. And I was like, we have to talk to more people. We have got to impact more people. And that's what continued to lead me every time to, Teach for America or to the White House or to then building an app where I could have global impact. So the entrepreneurial thing was less being an entrepreneur and it was more about how do I impact more people.
What did you do in the White House? You just skimmed over that so quickly.
I was had the amazing opportunity to be a White House fellow. Those are different from White House interns, which everyone is always like, "Oh my God, you were an intern! That's so cute." And I'm like, was not. It's a mid-career program where you are placed with leadership of a cabinet secretary or in a department in the East Wing or West Wing. And it's an incredible 1-year experience where you really learn how the federal government works. And the idea is to come back to your community and use everything you've learned to help your community access all of that in the federal government. And literally, that's what I did.
No, that's great. It's incredible.
And it was under Obama.
And so you had more of a non-traditional background before launching a startup. What skills carried over and what didn't prepare you at all?
Yeah. So I think there is a skill that I picked up, which is it's kind of like I move schools all the time just because I was looking for a high quality education. And I had to make friends again and again and again and again. There's this relationship building that you build doing that. And then in all of these jobs, right? I was going from nonprofit to government to business to there were all of these new vocabularies I had to learn. There were new people I had to talk to. I had to build relationships fast because if you don't build relationships fast, you're not getting anything done. And by the way, the first relationship to build is with the IT department. Always bring them cookies. And so, that was really helpful as I was building my startup because everyone is someone to build a relationship with, right? And so you have to be a chameleon and be able to code switch and kind of fit into very, very different circles. The thing that I wasn't prepared for or that I hadn't been trained for was honestly how lonely it is to run a startup. When you're in the government or nonprofit or all these other worlds, there's a structure, there's a system, there's a team, there's people, you can lean on others. But as a startup founder, it is, and we all say it and everyone's like, okay, it can't be that lonely. You're always at parties, you're always networking, you're always at this conference. But it's you don't have that. If you have a co-founder, amazing. That's probably the one person you can talk to. And then that's it.
Who ended up being part of that extended network that supported you? Because as an entrepreneur, I definitely struggled with the loneliness in the beginning. I actually thought something was wrong with me, but then I realized that I needed to tap into community intentionally. So I needed to reach out to people who were friends, people I'd worked with, ask them for advice, got counsel on my company, troubleshooting through issues or decision making. Who were those people for you?
I feel like even though there was that group of people around me, you still couldn't go as raw as you needed to as a founder, right? As a founder, you go from 1 hour being like, this is going to be the biggest company on the planet and I am the next Steve Jobs, to the next hour being like, how in the hell did I get myself into this? Who trusted me with this? And it's and you just, as you can't show that to many people because people then kind of question oh, are you the right leader? Because you're having a crisis of faith. Or, oh, you're so egotistical and you're so obnoxious, get out of my face. Right. So it's you're having so many emotions, you're dealing with so many things. And most people don't understand what it's like to have payroll weighing on you. That's a big difference, right? A lot of people that you're going to seek advice or support from are people who get wonderful W-2s, have really great health insurance, and don't have to worry that if they don't get an investor or make this deal or get that next customer, that they will not be able to make payroll. And that's like, there's just not many people that you can go to and be like, right? That sucks.
Yeah, no, that's super tough. I'd love to pivot a little bit now and talk a little bit about the build process. We know that less than 2% of venture capital goes to women. How was navigating all of that for you? How was that experience for you, fundraising?
So I've used that 2% quote since 2017 when I first started raising money. And guess what? It hasn't changed. I think it actually got worse. For Black women, Black women founders, it is absolutely atrocious. And so women, we are just underestimated. We are not trusted with the money. We are not trusted with business. I actually used to put my Harvard Business School logo like on slide 2 because I was like, okay, I know you think I'm like this cute teacher, but like I actually know what I'm going to be doing with this business. And so because of that underestimation, because of that like just lack of understanding, we go through more due diligence. It takes longer for us to get deals. Our numbers, right, the money that we get is more expensive because the terms are always shittier. And then like we still don't even get that much money. By the way, look at the McKinsey report. Women return more on an investor dollar than male founders do. So it's actually a really good investment to invest in women founders. But for some reason, they're not. So in 2017, so I raised my money pretty much before the magical Mayor Suarez tweet. For those of you that don't know, and since we're on a podcast, so there was some investor guy out of Silicon Valley who was like, I'm not even going to mention his name. He's just so douchey. And he was like, he was like, okay, guys, like, hot take. What if we move Silicon Valley? That's the voice I give him, by the way. It was like, what if we move Silicon Valley to Miami? And the mayor of Miami, the city of Miami, not the county, the city of Miami, Mayor Suarez, just writes 4 words. He goes, how can I help? And that was it. That's where all this explosion in the Miami tech community came from. But by the way, before that tweet, no one cared about us, right? Like we were always told as a founder, I heard so many times from investors, you're being selfish being in Miami because you're never going to raise money. Like no one's ever going to take you seriously in your models and bottles community. And so, it was hard. So I was fighting a million things, right? I was fighting the perception of Miami, which is maybe earned, maybe not. I was fighting the fact that people were underestimating me as a woman, right? I would walk in with my big hoops and they would be like, I don't know what to do with this. Like, like very, very concerned. I was, fighting the Latina thing. I was fighting I was in education, right? And I was trying to sell a consumer product. Like, I mean, just everything was against me.
So at what time do you feel like they started taking you seriously?
Thank you. Sorry. By the way, I talk a lot, so feel free to guide me. Okay. So in 2017, my co-founder and I, kind of launch Caribu as a product. It's, for those of you that don't know Caribu, you can read, draw, and play games in a video call. So kind of a magical moment. Instead of just a FaceTime call with a kid who has no attention span, you can actually bring out a book and read together and draw on something and play games and color things and do crossword puzzles, which actually allows kids to finally feel like they're playing, even though it's in a video call, which is really important. Okay. So in 2017, we launched this and I go to an angel group in Miami and I'm like, look at me, so cute. Look at my product, amazing. Give me money. And they were like, no. And I was like, okay. I was not expecting that. And they were like, well, where's your friends and family round? And I was like, what's a friends and family round? By the way, this is my first company. I've never done this. And they're like, well, that's your friends and family each giving you $10,000 to raise a round. And I was like, what friends and family do you have? And how can I come to one of your birthday parties to meet these people. What the hell? I was like, I don't have friends that can give $10,000. Are you joking? And they're like, well, if your friends and family round, if you didn't do one and your friends and family don't believe in you, then how can we believe in you? And I was like, and then you realize how women and people of color and people in lower socioeconomic classes are not able to raise. And so I was like, you know what? Screw you. Watch me. And so I went and did 1 million pitch competitions. Brooke knows. And so I literally just was like, fine, I'll just apply to every pitch competition. I'm going to win. By the way, when you're in one of those like women's pitch competitions, you get a lot of stickers, mentorship, like weird logo designs, hardly any money. But every pitch I did, I was gaining customers. I was gaining validation. I never did the same pitch twice because when a judge would ask me a question, I immediately was like, okay, in the next pitch, I'm gonna proactively bring that information in. So it just made me smarter. It made me better as a pitcher for investors. And so we were the winner or finalist in over 30 pitch competitions. And thank you. Yep, lots of time on stage and talking, which I'm really good at. And so then I went back to that angel group and I was like, hey, remember me? I'm still here. My product is still the same. And look at all this market validation that we have. So we were able to raise a round with those angels, which was awesome. And then one of the pitch competitions that I won was with Steve Case from AOL. So he became an investor, and then that catapulted us, right? Because everyone's like, "Oh, I want to be on the same cap table as Steve Case," and I was like, "Oh, is that all it takes?" Like,
What kind of traction did you have at that time when Steve Case was like, "Hey, this is something I'd be interested in"?
So it was still tiny traction because we were just getting started, but at the same time, it was traction that could be believed that it would scale. Right. And I think that's the difference is like, even if your traction is small, first of all, you have to always be, oh my God, what is it? There's 2 questions you can ask. Does anyone remember this?
Are you talking about the market size, TAM, SOM?
No, this is when women and men are asked questions about their startups. Men are given questions that are about like how successful they can be, and women are given questions about how risky the project is.
Oh, gotcha.
And I forgot the names of those 2 things. But by the way, this is research backed. Someone actually looked at this, and it doesn't matter if the investor is male or female. It's just who the founder is. And so, I think one of the things that I really, as soon as I found out this research, I always wrote my pitch applications or did, when I spoke to investors, it was always forward looking. It was always, yeah, maybe we have this many. Because they'd ask like, how much revenue do you have? And I was like, don't worry about that in 10 years. Right. So it's like, I mean, again, you have to have something to be able to say like, this is why that multiple will happen. But I think you also have to use whatever traction you have, right? We had 30 pitch competition logos that I could be like, look, this is market validation.
So what was it that like really stood out to them? Was it your profile, your background, your passion, your vision, the product? I mean, what was it that you felt like really they looked, because there's a lot of people out there pitching.
Yeah.
What about, and it wasn't exactly traction, right? Because you had so little traction. So this really just kind of piques my interest of what about the combination was, made them write the check.
Yeah. I think it was also the founding team. So my co-founder, Alvaro Savito, is absolutely amazing. He's a full stack engineer. He is my work husband. And he and I together were such a strong team. Like he was all technical. I was all non-tech. He built it and I sold it. And people saw how strong we were as a team. I think that's one of the things that really spooks investors the most is when you have 15 co-founders or if the 2 co-founders like cannot agree on things. And that's usually the thing that breaks these startups down. So they get very weird. So they saw how, much of a strong team we were. I think that really helped. I think also the fact that the product was growing by word of mouth, right? We hadn't spent $1 in marketing or advertising. Like, I think that was another thing.
That's amazing. And so what year was that?
So we raised around in 2017. No, 2018, maybe. 2017, 2018. And then, one of the things I want to talk about. Okay. So I raised this round. And then for founders in the room, guess what? You raise a round, you're like, party, I'm done. No, tomorrow you raise another round. Like literally, that is your job. You are just constantly raising money until you're able to fuel the machine. So as soon as I closed that round with Steve Case, I had to go and raise another round. I was introduced to an investor here in Florida, shall remain nameless as well. And the guy offered me $500,000 to invest. And he was like, well, it's not really my $500,000. We're going to go out to like my friends and convince them, and we'll make the 500,000 that way. And by the way, here's the term sheet. And the term sheet was predatory AF. Like I was reading it and I was like, are you betting with me or against me? Like, I'm not 100% sure. Like, I actually think you want me to fail because you'll make more money off of that. Like, it was horrible. And by the way, I needed that $500,000. And it took so much for me and my, co-founder. And we had one board member at the time. By the way, keep your boards small. We can talk about that later. So the three of us really looked at this and we were like, it's not worth it to get into a situation that we cannot get out of or that will be too expensive to get out of. So we turned the money down, and I went to equity crowdfunding because it had just become a real option for companies, and we ended up raising $1.7 million.
Not bad. And so your company's kind of slowly growing. Well, you're seeing good traction, and then 2020 lockdown.
Okay. So that $1.7 million that I just raised, right? That was in 2019. We raised it like by September, and we're using it, and this is great, and blah, blah, blah. We're like, okay, I know I'm gonna have to raise another round. And then Friday the 13th, March 13, 2020 happens.
Wow.
You guys don't remember it was Friday the 13th?
I did not remember that it was Friday the 13th.
Yeah. Oh, that day and the next day is like in my mind. So the 13th, for any of you who are parents, do you guys remember? You were like, oh my gosh, my kids are going to come home for 2 weeks for an extended spring break, and then they're going back to school. And so here on Instagram, I'm going to post the cute classroom that I set up where I'm going to be the teacher. Oh my God, don't pay teachers. They do nothing. Just kidding. Pay them $125,000, right? There was that whole thing. But March 13th and March 14th, people all of a sudden were looking for online tools and apps that they could use with kids. By the way, there's not a lot of children's books that are available online to be able to read. You can find some, but they're not that prevalent. But so March 13th, we see an opportunity. We're like, oh my gosh, even if it is 2 weeks, which I was like, read your history. 100 years ago is not 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. So I was like, I think we could be, the Instacart, right? Like an essential app for families who are needing a way to stay connected to grandkids that they cannot see, especially grandparents who were going to get sick because no one was vaccinated, right? Like, so we, on March 14th, 2020, we 10x'd the company overnight. Literally every metric was 10 times bigger than it was on March 13th.
Something that I think goes unsaid a lot is a bit of the serendipity and what you can't control.
Yes.
Because you weren't building thinking, hey, 2020, there's going to be a lockdown. Like, none of us would have ever thought of that.
And I didn't go to Wuhan as much as everyone's like, oh, where were you recently? I didn't start this on purpose.
What did that teach you about, like, building, having a vision, committing to what's important to you? Because, wow, like, that's just such a dream. Like, to think that you were building unsure of if this was going to turn out to be a success. Of course, you believe in it. You're giving your all. There's those really hard days. And all of a sudden, there's a massive peak that you would have never imagined. And had you given up, you would have never surfed that wave.
Yeah. When it happened, first of all, you always want your company to 10x. You don't want it to happen in 24 hours. I'll just let you know that. And I have an amazing co-founder who's an amazing engineer. And so nothing broke, which is like a lot. The thing that I think people see that as is they were like, oh, you got really lucky. Like, how amazing. You got so lucky that like everyone shut down and you were the only app for kids to keep them entertained and connected to their family. And I was like, guess what luck actually is? It's preparation meets opportunity. and we were prepared, right? We were the platform that was low latency. We were a strong system. We had a huge library of well-known books. We were already a global company. We had books in different languages. We had marketing already that had been done, right? So to be able to ramp that up and scale that very quickly is only because we were prepared. So if we had not been as prepared as we were, we could not ever have taken advantage of that moment.
Let's talk a little bit about the acquisition. I think we've built up a lot
That's why we're here.
into it. Yes, that's why we're all here. So how did this conversation with Mattel come about? Was it something that they brought up, that you brought up? How did it come about?
Okay. So I'm going to hopefully name a couple of things. So my acquisition was a unique snowflake. Everyone's acquisition is a unique snowflake. If you talk to someone about their acquisition, you will not copy it at all. But there are some things that I feel like every founder has to do and think about, which is hopefully what I will impart on you today. Okay. So number one, most companies will be sold to someone who already knows you. Everyone thinks, oh, I'm just going to build something and then I'm going to call a bunch of people and be like, hey, like, do you want to buy my company? And they're going to be like, yes. And that's not how it happens. So you have to be building partnerships from day one with people who need you in their supply chain, right? Or need you in their system. And then you get to a point where you are more expensive to have on the outside than to just bring you in. Right. So that's really what you're trying to build. And so we were very lucky because we were prepared for an opportunity. But Mattel was actually one of our first content partners, which also differentiated us from some copycats out there. It's very actually easy to make an app with a video. Actually, it's not. You can try and just see what happens. But the content was actually the gatekeeper, right? Like that was the moat that we had because you have to license every piece of content individually. Sucks. So we had all this amazing content. We had Mattel. People knew the brands on our platform. You could read Barbie and Hot Wheels and Thomas the Tank Engine. We already had a relationship with their publishing arm. If you had told me, do you think you'll sell to Mattel in 2021? I would have said, no. Are you kidding? They're a toy company. Like, what are they going to do with a tech platform? But in 2022, we got introduced to the guy, his name is Ron, who was he's just had started a group called the Future Lab. And the Future Lab was tasked with this, like figuring out what the future of play was going to be. And so he had heard about us from the publishing team and he was like, we got to talk. And I was like, we are literally the future of play and the amazing things that we can do with all the IP and the brands and toys and like circular economy, right? It's just awesome. So Ron, so I'm going to go into a couple of other like things that you need to know. You might think I'm just going to call a company's M&A department and talk to them and they're going to buy me. No, you have to find someone who is your doppelganger, who literally runs a P&L, who, if they don't buy you, is going to be fired, right? And if they do buy you, is going to be employee of the month. So that's really hard. You're going to talk to a lot of people who are not that person. This person also, Ron, I call my doppelganger because he could pitch Caribu almost better than I could. And you need that if he is going to convince the CFO and the CEO and the COO to do this deal, right? Like I'm not going to convince them. Someone inside has to convince them. So you have to find that person. And by the way, finding this person is like throwing a rock through a speeding train, like into the window, right? Like it's very precise. And I think that's the thing we don't talk about as much in acquisitions is I think people are just like, oh, it's like easy or there's a ton of people to talk to, but like, no, it's really hard and traumatic. So I think, finding that person and then having them convince the company. And the financials have to work, right? No one's going to convince them to buy something that's not working. But that's how you really are able to start making the deal. There's a bunch of other things we can talk about, but
how did you know that it was time to sell? Was it something in the market, something in yourself, a little bit of both?
Yeah. So again, I have an MBA and I worked at the Treasury Department in the US government. So 2021 is happening, and I'm like, reading tea leaves, and I'm like, this doesn't look good. And 2022, if you didn't make a JPEG into an NFT, no one wanted to talk to you. And I was like, I'm not doing that. And I started to realize, one, everyone was going FOMO and weren't taking companies seriously, even though we were literally having the best numbers. We had 40% month over month growth. Like, our revenue was insane. Our brand was insane. Literally, Apple was like, you're one of the best 15 apps of 2020. Like, we were on the Today Show, like all of that. And like, still people were like, do you have NFTs? And I was like, are you kidding me? So I was seeing that. And then I was also seeing the potential for this global recession, where I was like, oh, this is going to make capital really expensive, right? Like, this is going to make the money that I raise really expensive. And I had to think through two things. One, my financial runway, right? So I had to look at where we were financially. Could we go through the exit process? Because one of the things they don't tell you is how expensive it is to go through the exit process. One, you need money in your bank and runway to have leverage with the person that's going to buy you, right? Because if not, they will bleed you dry and then be like, we were going to give you $50 million. Just kidding. Here's 100. And what are you going to do? Right? $100, not 100 million. And the other thing that you need to be really conscious
So
of.
before you go into the other thing, they bleed you dry through what? Legal fees? Or I mean,
Great question.
What is bleeding you dry?
Okay. So you have how much it costs each month to run your company, right? And so you look at how much money you have in the bank and you say, okay, I have 4 months to live. Usually what will happen is when you get a letter of interest from an acquirer, first of all, you have to go and talk to all these people to get that letter of interest. Then you get the letter of interest. By the way, you have a fiduciary duty to your investors to get the best deal. So you are not done. You have one LOI. Now you got to go tell everyone, I have an LOI. Do you want to send me an LOI? Then you got to do like this little competition. And then you have to pick the best LOI for your investors. Doesn't matter about you or your team. It's for the investors always. And so you have kind of burned a month already there, right? So you're down to 3 months of runway. The company, rightly so, needs time to do due diligence, especially even if they know you. Even Mattel knew us and they still had to do some due diligence, right? They have to check the numbers and make sure the customers are real. And so that you usually get like a 30 or 45 day due diligence. Okay, 30, 45 days. Now I've got a month and a half of runway. And what they'll do is they'll say, okay, well, I know we said, $20 million, but I mean, here's $10. Will you take it? And what are you going to do? You have a month and a half of runway. You have a team that depends on you. You can't go out and raise the money in a month and a half, right? Also, your numbers are probably very different from when you started because you're focused on this. And so it is a tactic that people use. So I just want to warn you guys, like, you don't have the leverage when you are selling your company or when someone is trying to buy if someone's trying to buy your company, then you're, Instagram, and everyone's like, oh, we want all that money or those customers. But 99% of us, we sell our companies. And so I think it's really important to realize like what the other person is going to do so that you can be proactively prepared. That's why I say the more financial runway you have, the more leverage you have to be like, oh, that's a terrible deal. $10? No, thank you. I'm moving on and I'm going to find someone else, which you can't do.
We talked a little bit also before being on the podcast about emotional runway and financial runway, right? So were you also navigating challenges of like a limited emotional runway? Like, where were you yourself in the company and having run it for so long?
Yeah, I think that was the second thing that I kind of had to like be really honest with myself about, which was we had financial runway. I could go through the process, but my emotional runway was starting to get shorter and shorter. And what you don't want to do is you don't want to get to the point where you're so burnt out that's when you start the process to sell your company, because you will give it away or you will shut it down. You will be just so burnt out, like you will not be able to go through the process. You are still pitching, right? You are still telling people how amazing your thing is and how amazing your team is and why we should join you and da da da. If you are burnt out, you can't do that. So I always warn founders, like, do it way further before you even think like, okay, I'm getting close, like start the process to start either finding a new person to come in and take over for you. That's also fair. Or starting to get an exit strategy together because it takes a while. It takes a lot of money. It's traumatic as hell. And it's not for the faint of heart. So, and 99% of people don't do it. Like they're not successful at it, right? Like most companies, unfortunately, fold in silence. And so, emotional runway, you need that as the founder to be able to be successful in this.
Were you able to navigate that well? Did you have the emotional runway, or do you feel like you were already a little bit at,
I think I was like getting to that point where, like, again, I was so bothered with like where investors were. And like, again, I was just so frustrated by the fact that I had to work 3,000 times more, 3,000 times harder than anyone else to try and raise the same amount of money or less. I was also kind of realizing like, where is that ceiling? Where can we go? Right? Could we raise another round and then keep going and sell for, billions of dollars? Could we IPO? Was that an option? But then when the Mattel conversation happened in 2022, it made me realize, I was like, wait a second, like this doesn't happen every day where like this amazing company reaches out to you and says, hey, what would be really great is if you joined us. And it's like, as a startup, you don't want to give away that autonomy and the ability to like possibly like grow it into the next Amazon. But at the same time, like these deals, just like investor money, don't come around very often. And I had to make a choice of, okay, should I have someone else help us scale this?
Yeah, no, that's so good. And it kind of it makes you face, you know, a new direction for your company that maybe you didn't think about. I think that as a founder, we have a lot of ideas of where we want to go, but sometimes an opportunity presents itself that's a different direction than you had planned, but you need to really carefully evaluate it because it's not going to come around twice. Right. So you had to make the call. So a lot is misunderstood about how deals like this actually happen, right? So what can you kind of shed light on what that process was like?
Yes. Okay. So I am now part of this group called Post Exit Founders. And we are a emotional support group for each other because we are all so effing traumatized. No matter how your deal went, it is traumatic. Okay. Even if when you sold the company, you then became an employee of that company and had to do an earnout, that is traumatic. Like everything about this process is just so traumatic. And so I feel like people, kind of are like, oh, you probably like sneezed and sold your company. And it's like, no, like it was a lot of hard work. It was a lot of no's. It was a lot of ththings falling through. It was a lot of like self-reflection of like, is this a reflection on me? Am I just not good enough? Am I just not, just every day you're really struggling. It's just so up in the air. There's so many factors involved. There's so much that you have to do. There's so much chance and luck. You can be prepared, but if that opportunity doesn't show up, it doesn't matter. So I feel like it's a lot harder, more traumatic, more individualized than I ever thought.
How did you manage, or how would you recommend managing like the high expectations that often founders have? Like, oh, it's going to be a super high valuation. The first person's going to buy. The negotiation's going to be easy, or like it's not going to be so prolonged. Like, how would you recommend founders manage their expectations leading into these kind of negotiations and conversations?
That's a great question. And I have to give thanks to my friend Vlada, fellow founder. She's amazing. And she was very raw and vulnerable with me and told me about a deal. She was supposed to be acquired. And the deal fell through literally at the 11th hour. And she's telling me the story. Like, it's traumatic for both of us listening to this story. But I'm so grateful that she told it to me because when my first deal fell through, I was like, okay, this is totally normal. Keep going. Right. Whereas I think I would have just like shut down as a person where I was like, oh my God, that was it. That was our one chance. It's never going to come around again. But honestly, that's why it takes so long. Cause it's not again, you're throwing a rock through the window of a speeding train. So it's like, everything has to work out at the same time.
Is there anything you wish someone had told you about the process of selling your company now that you've gone through it?
I think that's one, right? That like it is a very everyone thinks there's like, oh, you do this and then you do this and then you do this and then you sold your company. And it's not at all like that. There are some buckets of things that you have to do, but you really do it's such an individual process. That was surprising to me. The thing that also surprised me was how many deals actually fall through. How many acquirers know that they have leverage and so we'll try to bleed you dry or we'll try to undervalue you or we'll try to say, okay, I would give you this multiple on your revenue, but this, right? Or, oh, we found something in due diligence. And you're just like, that's actually not real. But so like they have the leverage. And so how do you navigate? Like I didn't realize the power dynamics. And also the other power dynamic is I am negotiating with my future employer.
Exactly. I was about to ask about that. Like after you finished the deal, you became an employee. What was that transition like?
So an assertive woman who is just doing her job as the founder or CEO is labeled a bitch. Like that's what it is. If you fight for your company, if you fight for your investors, if you fight for your customers, you are difficult to work with. And so I had to like be really careful as I was negotiating with Mattel because I'm about to be their employee, but I also have the fiduciary duty to my investors currently, right? This is in the future that I will be their employee. So you're kind of balancing this. And it's really tough.
You know what I love? I once had an employer, worked with an entrepreneur actually when I moved back from Brazil to the US. And I remember I was working on something and I told him like, "Oh man, I'm so sorry. I probably sounded kind of bitchy when I said that." And he stopped me and he said, "Never apologize for being a strong woman."
I love this guy.
Isn't that great?
Amazing.
It was such a paradigm shift and, I think that we have that in our heads. Like if we're strong, if we're assertive, that's seen as like a bad thing.
Right. But if a guy were to fight for his investors and his company, it's seen very differently. So, as for all the women founders, for any founders of color in the room, just know that that dynamic is at play when you're trying to get acquired too.
Would you do it again?
Unfortunately, yes.
That's great. What would be different if you did it again?
I would definitely try to get to profitability before taking anyone else's money. So I would bootstrap to profitability and then go get investors because you have so much more leverage when you can say, well, I can cover my own costs. I don't need you. So like your terms are shitty and I'm not taking them. When you are figuring it out and you have $0 in your bank account, like you're desperate for cash, you're, giving away a lot of equity, you're, taking a lot of expensive money. And so I think the next time that's what so Alvaro and I are going to build another company. That's just how it's going to happen because he's so amazing.
Let's go. That's great. Are there any founder behaviors that kill the acquisition potential?
Yeah. If you are a founder who walks in with the ego of this company is the hottest thing on the planet, if you don't want to acquire us, like that's your loss. If you go in saying like it's a 10x multiple of our revenue or nothing, like when you go in with these non-negotiables, again, that company doesn't need you. They don't need that headache. They don't need your attitude. They don't need your audience. They don't need your revenue. And so when you go in with that inflexibility, which is hard, right? Because again, you are trying to fight for your company, you're trying to fight for your investors. That is what I've seen blow up most deals.
So we have a couple of questions from the audience that were submitted beforehand. So the first one, as a startup, how do you guarantee that your original mission does not get destroyed or changed when acquired by a corporate company that has their own goals?
So once it's acquired by a corporate company, you don't get to decide what is happening with that company, which is, again, why #traumatic, right? Because sometimes they shut you down because you were a competitor. Sometimes they give you to a team that has no resources. And so you just kind of bleed out dry. Sometimes they give you resources, but then don't give you like kind of the marketing spend behind it. And so you're just like, so there's like a lot of different things, or they change the mission, which is very frustrating. But before that happens, I think it's really important that you always, as founders, are obsessed with the problem you're trying to solve and not the solution. Because if you become obsessed with the product that you're trying to build or the solution that you've come up with, and now you start going to look for customers, you are doing it absolutely wrong. You need to be obsessed with solving this problem. And if you solve that problem correctly, if you focus on that, you will have the most amazing customers. You will have great revenue. You will have a community that really believes in this. And it will be much harder to change the mission of a company that has that type of backing.
That's good. The next question is, beyond revenue, what factors do you believe mattered most in helping your company stand out and get acquired?
Yeah. So brand is something we hardly talk about. And it's one of those things where it's like, how do you value a brand? But if you guys remember around the time so this is 2022, Facebook had decided to launch a competitor against us. They made a couple mistakes. One, they launched hardware. I was like, that's dumb. That's expensive and dumb. And then the second thing that they did is they forgot they were Facebook. And I was like, no one trusts you. No one wants another device listening to them in their home from Facebook. And so we got really lucky that Mattel saw how incredible the trust in us was from our community. When you're talking about children and technology, if you don't have that trust, it's not going to go very far. So I think for us, that was something that was Mattel really, I don't think we could have done it if we didn't have that trust with our community when it came to the type of stuff we were doing.
As a digital product, how did you build that trust?
So we always were COPPA compliant, right? We always followed the letter of the law. We also made technical decisions that probably hurt the company in traction, but were the right thing to do. And I'll tell you a perfect example. So I don't know if you guys remember around that time, there were a lot of apps that were like, you signed up and then they were like, cool, give us access to your address book and we're going to add everyone that you know.
Mm-hmm.
That is incredibly dangerous when you are talking about children. Right? You don't know who's in that address book. There are ex-boyfriends, ex-girlfriends, ex-family members, like people that should not be talking to your children. If we could have added so many more users if we had just put that functionality in, but we refused.
No, that's good. Beyond valuation, what were the most important terms you fought to include to protect your team and mission?
So that one's really tough because, again, first of all, I can't talk about any of the details of the deal because it's still 5 years. Yeah. It's not 5 years. But the other thing I would say is even if I told you what those things were, they're going to be different for you. The one thing I will go back to is to say, have those non-negotiables, but remember that your non-negotiable may blow up the deal. And so you have to be very thoughtful about so for example, they may say, well, we're going to lower the revenue, but we'll take the entire team. Or we're going to give you more money, but we're not taking the team. Or we're going to give you some money up front, a lot of equity, but you have to stay for 6 years. By the way, Amazon. So yeah.
How long did you end up staying with Mattel?
We actually got very lucky and only had a 2-year earnout.
Okay.
So Alvaro is still there. He loves working on the cool stuff. I finished my earnout and then ran for office because
that's great.
I did not win. Thank you. I appreciate it. It was a lot of hard work and it was awesome. And I was trying to do the right thing, but I was on the right side of history, wrong side of the election. And so here we are.
Yeah. If you could go back and do it all over again, what would you change?
I would name the company something that did not cost so much money to get the .com of.
That was a huge challenge.
It is so expensive, especially when you're looking for like one word. So heads up, we had Caribu.co, right? Because it was like $10. And an advisor, made the very good point. She was like, who's your audience? And I was like, glamas. We called them glamas, glamorous grandmas. Think of like Kris Jenner and like, Whoopi Goldberg. And so we were like, oh, these glamas, that's who's, buying our product. That's who our like best customers. And she was like, do you think they know .co? And I was like, oh, that's fair. And if you did .com, it did not redirect to .co. So we were like, all right, we have to buy it. And it was very expensive.
So we went through all the questions from the audience, but is there anything else that maybe we didn't touch upon that you think would be interesting to share with folks? Any insights or advice?
I love working with founders, especially founders of color, women founders. So if you are looking for, I felt like it was, again, a very lonely experience to sell my company because there were not many women that I could speak to about it. Like, I'm not going to call Jessica Alba and be like, hey, how was it selling your company? Like, any tricks? So, if you are a woman, if you are an underrepresented founder, historically ignored founder is how I like to say it, because it's not on us. Please reach out. I just want to be there for you as a sounding board and help you not make the same mistakes that I did. You will make your own mistakes, but if you can avoid some, that would be great. And also, just as someone that you can like call and scream and I will just listen. You can leave me nasty voice notes and just like get it off your chest. I want to be there for people because I know how hard it was when I didn't have that.
That's awesome and super generous of you. What are you excited for next? Like, you've already gone through this process of building your company, learned so much being in the trenches, made your way out, and now you have all this experience. Like, is it still education? Like, what are you like seeing that you're interested in building around? Or is there like a problem or, something that is really captivating you?
So I am in month 9 of my 6-month sabbatical because I was burned out, like running a startup and selling a startup and then running for office, which is just, I don't know why I did that. Like it was just a lot. And so I think right now I'm focused on just traveling and resting and getting ready for the next thing, because there will definitely, no one is worried that Max is not going to go and do another thing. But she needs to be well rested to do that. So,
But plans are to continue in South Florida.
Miami 305, ride or die. Sorry to South Florida. 305-786
754 954. All the numbers. That's great. This has been awesome. Thank you for sharing. How can people reach you?
Question.
Like, if they have more questions maybe that we didn't get to.
Yeah. Connect with me on LinkedIn, but please leave me like a little message that you were here, because I get such random LinkedIn requests. So if you just say you were here, I will absolutely accept you. And then we can just, keep talking. And I would love to, like, if you're working on something, I'd love to repost your stuff. If you're looking for, to hire someone, I like seeing those things because I have a great network of people. So LinkedIn, and just make sure I know who you are.
That was another episode of Founder Tactics. Thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to get updates on new episodes, live recordings, and everything happening in our founder community, make sure to subscribe, follow, and rate the podcast. And also, you can head to foundertactics.com to learn more about our work. See you next time.